Interesting developments here at the National Results Operation Center as day two of counting almost well, more than halfway through. And we've been speaking to a number of people here at the Results Center in Madrid. We've been speaking to agents of political parties, we've been speaking to analysts, we've even been speaking to some of the scientists who have been working on different models, attempting to predict the outcome of this election. And of course, very excited to see how this unfolds. In fact, earlier on, we did speak to political analyst Professor Andre Duvenacher. And the consensus, I think, among political analysts is that this is coalition territory at this point, with the ANC hovering around 42% of the votes that have been counted thus far. But joining me now in our studio here at the Results Center is Mr. Wayne Thring, Deputy Leader of the African Christian Democratic Party. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Well, thank you for having me, Zahid. It's a pleasure being here.
We've been speaking to many parties, 52 parties on the national ballot, um, and of course, diverse interests being placed at the center of this election. Very important election. In fact, earlier one of our guests was saying this is quite a historic election, and I think many people are in agreement with that. What is your take on the election so far? Firstly, starting with the process of elections on Wednesday, and then, of course, moving forward until the developments that have transpired up until today.
Well, I think I'm in agreement that indeed these are pivotal elections, important election. There has been the saying that this is the new 1994. So these 2024 elections is the new 1994. Just as 1994 was important as the first ushering in the first democracy in South Africa, these particular elections are important because they are quite possibly we're going to be ushering in a new dispensation, a new normal of coalitions. And so, with the ANC predicted to come in at under 50%, and some even said under 40%, it certainly is going to be a very interesting period politically going forward, and coalition politics is quite possibly going to be the order of the day. The ACDP has been a part of that particular process in terms of coalitions, right from the period of around 2000 in the Western Cape. We were one of the first political parties to have formed a coalition with other political parties, which would include the DA at the time, where the ACDP had, some of at the time in the Western Cape, the deputy mayor position. And we also had at a provincial level an MPL seat. But we were very key and instrumental also in putting together some of the documents which now prescribe and determine how coalitions actually function. So it is indeed going to be an interesting period ahead. But the ACDP is not a newbie. We are not a newcomer. We've been around for the last 30 years, and ACDP been established some 100 days before the first 1994 elections. And, as a new political party, there are those who would want to kind of write you off and say, nothing is going to become of you. So we have the critics and the skeptics who made those particular calls or predictions. And after the first elections democratic elections in 1994, well, the ACDP obtained 2 national seats and 4 provincial seats. And we have always had representation at national parliament. So with the results that are currently on the results screen, we have at least secured 1 seat, possibly 2, and maybe even 3 on a fraction, and maybe 4. So we would be happy if we could get the retain our 4 seats, and then whatever bonuses that we get after that would certainly make the ACDP happy. But certainly, I think key times for many political parties, 52 parties on the ballots, and I think that the pie is kind of got quite big. And that maybe also is a contributing factor to some of your established political parties kind of seeing a very slow uptake in terms of their numbers.
I mean, the way you've just put it for us and the context that you've drawn for us, ACDP has been here for almost as long as our democracy. And throughout these 3 decades that have since passed, we noticed a trend where you've had the ANC clinging to a majority. You've had the DA coming in at second place, and more recently, since 2014, the EFF at third place. But that has since changed. The results that we see now at the moment, as we look at the leaderboard, we see the MK party is now in the third place. So things really have been shaken up here. But just reflecting on the ACDP when you just broke into the space, as a new party that was very early in the years of democracy in South Africa, what was that like? With these bigger parties being established, they've got their history decades prior, and now
ACDP.
ACDP, sorry, coming onto the scene.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Well, I think it was a difficult period, a really difficult period for us. It was a difficult period for us because, we just, when we were offline, we were just kind of chatting about, faith and politics. And so it was a difficult period because we were still in that space in South Africa where politics, particularly within the church group and our faith group, was considered to be a kind of a dirty game, and that if anybody from within our circles of faith and within the church entered into politics, they were considered to be ones who were betrayers of the faith. And so you had that particular aspect and that kind of criticism that we had to endure. The criticism from those kind of close to us who did not understand us and did not understand the vision that the ACDP had and the purpose and the goal that we were looking at achieving, the purpose that we came into politics for and the goal that we actually wanted to achieve. So on the one hand, we had that to contend with. But then on the other hand, you had others who, some of the more established or the bigger parties who kind of frowned upon us as a church and said, you guys just need to go back. What are you doing here in politics? Go back to your church. You can't bring your pulpit here. You can't bring your ideas here. Your ideas don't belong here. They belong in the church. So you had the criticisms, in a sense, coming from both sides, from within and from without. And so that particular period of 1994 was certainly a very difficult period. And it has only been in the last few years that those of our faith have come to us and said, look, we now understand. So we apologize. We apologize for being critical. We apologize for judging you. And they've come to our president because he was the one who took, had to take the full brunt of the criticism. So they've now come to him and they've apologized, and they said, look, we understand now the need for people of faith, the need for the church to engage politically, to become involved politically, and to ensure that the values that we hold dear, values that are dear to so many of us, values of accountability, values of transparency, values of righteousness, and values of justice, and values of peace, and values of unity, values of we are created in the image and in the likeness of God, all of mankind created in God's image and in God's likeness. So these particular values that the ACDP has been espousing and the ACDP has been putting forward, and we've been protagonists of these particular views, but it hasn't come without its criticism. But finally, we're beginning to break ground. Now, just as we begin to kind of break ground, now you have, it's much like your disruptive industries. Some of your new companies, they kind of break into a market, they disrupt the market, and so people have to now look at adjusting. So we've kind of at a disruptive political space with all of these new political parties that have come in, with the likes, as we've seen now with MK and some of the other political parties that have the potential to disrupt the political space. We're not sure just yet what that is going to look like. But for the ACDP, our faith is in the Lord. We look to Him. We understand that we do what we are able to do. We do our best. We work as hard as we can, and then we have to rest in Him. The final outcome, and whatever that particular outcome is, we believe that that is where the ACDP is meant to be. So while others are frowning and others are having these emotional roller coasters and having minor heart attacks, we rest. We rest because we know the God that we serve, and our future, and our faith is in Him.
I think over the course of this conversation, something that's really prominent and really sticking out to me is the emphasis on faith. And we live in an age where there sort of is the perception that people have taken a path down towards religiosity. And of course, we can't cast judgment on everyone, but that's the trend and the perception that is out there.
Yeah.
So, what space, I mean, what sort of contribution do parties that place an emphasis on faith, and there are numerous, there you,
Yeah.
for example, you get the Ultima, you have the Sun Party, you've got the ACDP. What sort of role do you have to play in this democratic space?
What makes it easy for me, also as a minister of the gospel, what makes it easy for me to become involved in the ACDP is the fact that who I am in my church on a Sunday does not change when I'm in Parliament on a Monday or a Tuesday. So the value system that the ACDP has is aligned with the value system that my church has, is aligned with the value system of the organization, the church organization that I submit to. So that is what makes it easy. So easy for me to serve within the ACDP as a person of faith, as a minister of the gospel, and also as a member of parliament, or should I say, former member of parliament, hoping to be re-elected. Uh, so it makes it easy for me as an ACDP. I see the disconnect, and I see the conflict and the friction that others in other political parties face when they have to make a decision politically that is counter to their faith, when they have to make a decision that is counter to their value system. They are placed in a very, very difficult and an awkward position. So either they have to book off sick, or they have to make some kind of excuse not to be in Parliament on the day of voting because that particular vote would conflict their particular faith. You can take one, for example, on abortion, abortion on demand, and the ACDP believes that life is sacred, and so our position as being opponents to the termination of pregnancy, as it's called, is well known. And so people who struggle with their value system and their party's political worldview would be in a serious place of conflict. But not so with us within the ACDP, because our value system within our church groups is aligned with the value system within the ACDP. So for myself and for those of us within the ACDP, it makes it easy for us to continue to practice our faith even within the political system, but also understanding that our faith also offers solutions. It offers solutions to the challenges that we're facing with regards to poverty. 25% of South Africans go to bed hungry. How do we solve this crisis that we have of poverty? It helps us to look at solutions that we have with regards to unemployment. 32% unemployed, 41% on the expanded definition, 44% youth unemployment. How do we solve these challenges of youth unemployment? Then we look at the challenges that we have within the economy. Our economy is tanking. We have reached now junk status, and we have a debt to GDP of some 74% and growing. We have a deficit on our national account, a deficit on our current account, 300 billion deficit, in addition to the 5 trillion that we've borrowed. All right. So what are the solutions? And so as the ACDP, then we look at our faith, we look at what the Word of God says, and we ask ourselves, how can we look at solving these particular problems that the country faces? We look at crime. How can we face the challenges that we have in terms of 85 murders a day, 135 rapes in South Africa every day? What are the solutions that we can bring? And so then we begin to interrogate. And so we come up with our solutions, on crime and the rape that we currently seen. The ACDP is saying, for example, we need an independent crime fighting unit, much like the Scorpions, which is like a Chapter 9 institution, which is independent from government, and will continue and carry out its duties without fear, favor, or prejudice. We also talk about, ensuring that those who are arrested for crimes like murder and rape, no bail. And if you're convicted, no parole. You will serve your sentence until the last day. So criminals must know that under the ACDP, crime will not pay. Then how do we address the issues of poverty? How do we address the issues of unemployment? And how do we address the issues of the economy? And so we look at our economic policy. We have to create an environment that is conducive. Government's responsibility is to create an environment that is conducive for business to grow. Government's responsibility is to ensure that there is political stability as well as policy certainty. And so the ACDP says, right, this is what we do. We create an environment conducive for business to grow. How do we do that? We focus on our small business sector. We focus on the wealth that South Africa has. We are one of the wealthiest countries, not just on the continent, but in the world, in terms of the mineral resources that we have beneath our soil. We have 200 years worth of coal, some of the best coal ever beneath our soil. We have 70 to 80% of the world's platinum beneath our soil. We have the monopoly, competitive as well as comparative advantage. Why are we not taking advantage of our raw materials? In Parliament, and in particularly in my committee, I speak about trade and industry. I've been speaking about using the policy of beneficiation. And beneficiation is a very simple policy that would benefit South Africans. It's a very, if you have platinum that is there, 80% of the platinum reserves are here in South Africa. Instead of taking those 80% reserves and exporting it, creating work in another country who doesn't have the platinum that we have. So you create employment and then we buy it back at an inflated price. So the ACDP has saying we need to grow our beneficiation. We need to grow, and there has to be an index to track how far are we doing. So not just to have a beneficiation policy, but also to have an index that's kind of tracking how are we actually growing beneficiation. Taking a particular mineral, you develop your industries, your factories, your companies around close to the mines. And so the mineral comes out of the raw material, comes out of the mines. It goes to those industries, those factories. It's beneficiated. Its value is added to it. We are creating jobs locally. We are creating jobs in South Africa. We are reducing our unemployment rate. We are reducing poverty. We are reducing our the gap that we have between the rich and the poor. Gini coefficient of some 0.68%. And so all of those negative indices we are reducing. We are reducing crime because now people are earning a decent living. But we have the resources, and the ACDP has been putting forward these particular policies and these particular ideas. And so to say that people of faith do not have solutions to the country's challenges and to the country's problems is a misstatement, a serious misstatement. In fact, when the ACDP's policies were interrogated and a blind survey was done of different political parties, 70% of the respondents in that particular survey identified with the policies of the ACDP. And yes, we have a conservative background, but that's who we are. And we are not going to change our worldview for any political party or anyone else. This is who we are, and we are going to continue to be who God has called us to be.
Of course. And then, of course, I think We'll come back to the issue of faith in a few moments, but the multi-party uh, charter. Earlier on, we heard John Steenhuisen here at the Results Centre saying the DA still remains committed to the multi-party charter. What's the ACDP stance on that as we see the results coming in?
I think it's disappointing that when we joined the multi-party charter, remember that the ACDP was not a part of the Moonshot Pact because we were not happy with how it was actually initiated and how it was started. Other political parties then joined, and the name was changed to the multi-party charter, which then took it away from the DA. We also had said right at the beginning that the ACDP would not join the Moonshot Pact because what John Steenhuisen was speaking about was a kind of a coalition of political parties. The ACDP has fastidiously said that we will not form coalitions prior to an election. Coalitions can only be meaningfully established after the election results have been pronounced, and we've maintained that particular position. And so I think that our disappointment has come with the double speak or the mixed messaging from the DA in particular, saying that you committed to the multi-party charter, but on the other hand, we're hearing statements that either, the federal council chair, Mrs. Zilla, has indicated that, they are talking to the ruling party, to the ANC, and the possible coalition with the ANC is not off the cards. And then we again hear the rumors and allegations that a similar statement was made by John himself, who said that a coalition with the ANC is not off the table. And so, it did cause tension because we now had to interrogate, because when the multi-party charter framework was being established, one of the commitments was that there would be no working with the ANC because of the corruption, and where the ANC was actually taking the country was in the wrong direction.
Even if to avoid what the DA has termed the doomsday coalition.
Well, this is what we said. The commitment was not to form a coalition with the ANC, even if it has to, because when you begin to attach yourself to a political party that has become, where corruption has become so synonymous with them, where good governance is no longer what we're seeing within the ruling party, where service delivery is failing across the country, where more than 50% of our municipalities, the vast majority of those under the ANC, are, in terms of the Auditor General, no longer going concerns. Now, when you see all of this happening, and then you begin to attach yourself to a political party that is on the decline, that has this huge baggage, all it's going to do is drag you down. And so yes, I think it did create some tension, and I chaired the last meeting, MPC meeting that we had, and it was one of the difficult meetings that I've had to chair. But yes, I think that there are those of us who have indicated that we would remain committed to looking at that particular framework and what the framework may look like, and if there's a possibility of a coalition coming together after the elections. We firstly, as the ACDP, would have to have our NEC meeting and then make a decision, because we did not say that we would automatically be a part even of a coalition that would come from the MPC, from the multi-party charter. We would have to firstly get the mandate from our support base, get the mandate from our leadership, and then we respond in terms of a coalition, a possible coalition. So there's no commitment even to the MPC of the ACDP of a coalition. So I think that it has been a bit of a difficult path to walk, but the ACDP was committed to working with some like-minded political parties to steer South Africa in the right direction, and to reduce our crime levels, to reduce our poverty levels, to reduce the decline that we are seeing economically, to reduce the challenges that we've seen in our health sector, in our education sector, where some 81% of our grade fours are functionally illiterate after spending 4 years in a public school. 81% of our grade fours are unable to read with meaning. So, we can speak on so many we can talk of indices, we can talk about the health sector and their challenges there within the public health sector, where government hospitals and some 700 public institutions, health institutions, are not able to, 99% are not able to meet with their own standards that government has set for these public health institutions. So, very clearly, the country was heading in the wrong direction, not able to produce the energy, the electricity that the economy requires, and we're losing billions of rands every day because of South Africa not able to export, we're not able to produce because our factories are not, functioning, and manufacturing is not at its optimal, and so we're losing business to our neighboring countries. Our ports have become stagnant in some cases, Durban, and we're losing business now to Maputo and Walvis Bay. What used to be the most efficient and the busiest port on the continent, under the ruling party, everything just seems to be collapsing.
Yeah.
Now, how do you form a coalition when you can see where this ship is heading? It's full of holes.
I'm just wondering if perhaps you could shed some light on what's going on within the MPC at the moment. Have you guys caucused at any point since election day? As the results are trickling in, what are the collective thoughts of the?
Yeah, there hasn't been an MPC meeting since election day, but I think that obviously once the results are out, there will be a meeting of the leaders of the MPC. Obviously, it would be to determine what is the future of the MPC, whether there is a future, depending obviously on the election results, um, and I think political parties also would, and leaders that are there, would also have to either come with a caucused position or a position where they have a mandate to act on behalf of their party to make a decision, or it will be a meeting to foreground what the outcome of the election is and what are the possibilities, and then to gain the position of the parties, and then another meeting would probably have to be reconvened. So there's a whole lot of different possibilities. One of the other possibilities is, look, the MPC is not going anywhere because of different dynamics with regards to some of the other parties that we've seen, now making the appearance on the stage, on the political stage, and that is somewhat thrown the cat amongst the pigeons. And then one would have to ask, is there value in the MPC? Does the MPC continue? And if it does continue, on what basis does it continue? So I think that there's a lot of variables, and we'd have to interrogate all of those different variables going forward.
And then, of course, we've mentioned about faith. It is the ACDP after all. And just to link with this question of coalitions, of course, much is uncertain at this stage. We really
Yeah.
don't know what the final results are really going to look like. And
Yeah.
of course, that's extremely important to bear in mind when we're thinking about coalition negotiations and possible coalition arrangements afterwards. But if it came to the point where you had to work with Al Jamaa, for example, and we know that party mainly represents Muslim interests, would you be keen to work with such a party?
Look, the ACDP has pronounced on two parties that we would not work with. And those two political parties are the ANC and the EFF. We've made no pronouncements on other parties like, the MK, no pronouncement on other parties like, we now see now, that is the PA, or Al Jamaa. So we have not made any pronouncement on other political parties except the two where our leadership, receiving the mandate obviously from our support base, that these are two political parties that we will not work with, ANC and the EFF. And so that's currently our position.
All right. And then just finally, going into these elections, there was much talk about the potential impact of the Palestinian issue on domestic politics. In fact, many were labeling the ANC as taking an opportunistic stance by taking Israel to the ICJ. And that really, I think, looking at how it's played out, I don't really think um, Palestine has really had that much of an impact on domestic politics, but it really was made to seem as such in the build up to the elections. And of course, various parties were placed in various boxes,
Mm.
and the ACDP found itself in a position where it was boxed into the pro Israel camp. Uh,
Correct.
yeah,
Well, again, as a party of faith, every political party has a particular worldview, and our worldview, it's a position that we take based on the biblical premise that we've got to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We pray for the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and that our God is a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. So, based on the biblical premise, it would be asking for the ACDP to go against its fundamental value system and position of faith. It would be much like asking, I suppose, those of the Muslim faith to, because popular opinion says pork is actually healthy for you. Don't listen to popular opinion. Don't listen to don't listen to your to what your imams are saying and what your teaching is saying. Go with the flow. Go with popular opinion. And I think that most of the devout Muslims will not listen to popular opinion and will stick with their faith. And that's a position that the ACDP is in. That does not mean that we hate Palestinians. The ACDP has no enemies. We have no enemy. We do not see people of different faiths, different ethnicities, different backgrounds as enemies. But yes, we do have a position, and it's unfortunate. I think in this particular war, it's unfortunate that lives are being lost, because one life lost in any war is one life too many. And so the ACDP has also made that position. We do want to see an end to this war so that there can be peace between the Palestinians and between the Israelis, and hopefully everybody will be able to work together. We come not just as within the ACDP, as we don't just want to be peacekeepers, but we want to be peacemakers. Peacekeepers, they just keep the opposing parties. You stay on your side and you stay on the other side. But peacemakers, you bring these groups together, and there is peace that is lasting. And so this is what we want to see. And our Savior, Jesus, we also call him the Prince of Peace. And his word tells us, he says, "My peace I leave with you." And it's not the peace as the world gives. And so there's a different peace of the world. And that's the kind of peace that we clearly also want to see. And so on both sides, I would suppose, on both the Israeli side as well as on the Hamas side, and I don't even want to say the Palestinian side, because we just narrow it down, because there are those who say, I spoke to somebody of Muslim faith who said to me, Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinian people, and so please don't talk about Hamas, and because they are somebody else, and we also don't support Hamas. So it becomes a little bit confusing at times, but very clearly we want to see the peace between the Israelis and the Palestinian people, because to a large extent your Israelis and your Palestinian people also have the same descendancy. They are sons of and children of Abraham.
sure. I think I do understand you insofar as what you're saying is this is a biblical imperative. And as a Christian party, or a party claiming to represent Christian interests, that surely then understandably so would be the way that you view this. But there are some churches who might see otherwise on the same issue.
It's true. I think that that's the challenge. Just like there are some Muslims, as I said, I found in some of my interviews that I've been doing here, there are some Muslims who also see differently, and certainly have condemned Hamas for the attack on Israel, and for taking. He says, and this is what the Muslim guy that I was speaking to came to me. He says, our Quran says it is wrong. It is wrong to kill women. It is wrong to kill children. It is wrong to kill the innocent. because they are all children of Allah. And this is what this is what he's saying to me. So he's saying to me that, we condemn our particular grouping, Muslim grouping, condemns what Hamas did. It was wrong, in terms of what they did. Now, what we are not hearing, however, is we're not hearing, and I said to him, it's a pity because you're like one of the very few voices who have actually condemned the atrocities that were perpetrated against Israel. And as I said, lives on both sides have been lost, and it is sad that those particular lives have been lost on both sides. But we are, as the ACDP, as I said, our position is, we're calling for peace within the war, just like we said with the Russia-Ukraine war. The war that is also taking place in Yemen, where, even in Yemen, the number of lives that have been lost, children, you talk about maybe 30, or I think it's 30 to 40,000 within the Gaza area, and it's tragic. All right, and I don't want to underplay those lives lost. But again, when you also look at the lives that have been lost in Yemen, you're looking at hundreds of thousands. And I struggle. I struggle because why are the lives of Yemenis, women and children, not being? Why is there no crying out? Why is there no condemnation to those that are engaged in this particular war in Yemen? Why is there no condemnation? Why is there no condemnation for the thousands of children? I've seen some of the pictures of some of these children, just like we've seen, both on the Israeli side as well as on the Palestinian side. But why is it that we don't have that condemnation? Why is there no condemnation to what is happening to Muslims in northern China who are being abused, who are being imprisoned, who are being tortured because of their faith? Why is there a silence? Why is there silence from our side with what is happening in Nigeria, where over 60,000 Christians have been killed because of their faith? So I see sometimes, in my view, the hypocrisy. There's a silence, and it's almost as if, well, if these lives are lost, it's okay. It's okay for certain groupings, whether it's your Muslims in northern China, or whether it's Christians in Nigeria, or whether it's Muslims in Yemen. If those particular ones lose their lives, we keep quiet about it. But when it comes to Israel, Palestine, well, then the whole world now kind of has to sit on edge. But as I said, there is this, in my view, there is this hypocrisy, I think, in terms of the secular media in particular, who are silent on some of the atrocities that are committed in different countries to people of faith, and they take one particular area and it's kind of magnified.
I mean, okay, so when we look at it that way, for the purpose of this conversation, suppose we're willing to go as far as to say Hamas does not equate to Palestine, Hamas does not equate to Palestinian people. Surely, similarly, we could also say the Israeli regime does not equate to the people of Israel or the Israeli people and your political imperative. So, in that case, then, would you be willing to go as far as to condemn the Israeli regime for the extent of atrocities that they arguably have perpetrated against Palestinians? We're looking at images of decapitated babies coming out. We're seeing thousands of people being killed, people being stuck under rubble. Would you be then so far, to that extent, willing to condemn the actions of the Israeli government?
Look, I think that when one speaks about, looking at the Israeli regime as being one that is illegitimate, currently Israel is recognized internationally as a state. So Israel is a state. The question is Gaza a state? So that, that's kind of open for questions. So Israel has had its elections, and so there's and it is a legitimately recognized state internationally. So I think that equating, the regime in Israel with the regime in Gaza is not, it's not the right comparison to make. All right, so that's in the first instance. But I think that the ACDP has said that where they are and where they are proven atrocities, where Israel has gone against what is known as acceptable international practice when there is a war that is being conducted, and where they break those particular codes of international law, then very certainly I think that much like we would do with any other nation, whether it is Saudi Arabia, whether it's China, whether it's the United States, whichever nation flouts international law when it comes to when a war is actually being undertaken, needs to be held to account.
But then again, Hamas is an elected representative in the Gaza Strip.
Is it an elected
Through
representative
elections.
of a state?
Well, that's obviously depending on which direction you're coming at this from. There are people who might argue that Israel was created by supplanting an existing state and existing indigenous people. And of course, that means you're going to have to look at it from which direction
Well,
that you're coming
well,
from.
sure. I think that the debate then would, how far back do we go in terms of who the legitimate people actually are? Because you can go back some 6,000 years or so, where 4,000 BC, when Abraham was called from the Babylonian area, from the of the Chaldeans, he was called, and the Lord said to him, "I will give unto you the promised land." And Abraham walked that particular land that God said he would give to him. And he says, and you and your generations will inherit this particular land. So that's 4,000 years ago. And then, 4,000 years BC. And then 2000 BC, then you have King David, who established the nation of Israel. And he is known, and there are, artifacts which indicate that David was the king, not of Palestine, but he was the king of Israel. So, it becomes then a question of how far really do we go back? Do we go back 6,000 years to look at who the real inhabitants of Israel and the land of Israel really were? Or do we go back 100 years, and so you're going to have a challenge, I think, when it comes to legitimacy and which particular people group are the actual legitimate inhabitants of the promised land, because both groups will claim to have legitimacy. And I suppose the challenge also is with regards to, Jerusalem is seen as a capital for Christians. It is a holy city for Christians. It is the holy city also for Muslims. It is the holy city for the Jewish people. How then do we, as Christians, Muslims, and Jews, find each other to ensure that we are able to visit a place where, for us, one of the holiest cities in biblical history, a place where we believe that when Jesus returns, that will be the place that he will be coming to. So how do we as Christians also ensure that we have access to what is a holy place for us? And the only possibility of that is for us to be able to sit and to engage each other. This is what the ACDP has actually said, where the ruling party have failed. The ruling party, in terms of their policy, their international relations policy, the ruling party, the ANC, their policy with regards to Russia and Ukraine was, they said, a non-aligned policy. We take a non-aligned policy. This is our policy with regards to foreign relations, right? A non-aligned policy. Countries outside of South Africa, where there are conflicts, we have this non-aligned policy, because we want to go there as arbiters. We want to go there as mediators, and we cannot be mediators if we take an aligned position. And so we said, we actually support government's non-aligned policy with Russia and Ukraine, because in our opinion, that's the position that we need to take. That we come there and we look at being peacemakers. But government changed their policy. They went against their own policy, which is non-aligned, and they took an aligned position by taking Israel to the ICJ, and so they broke policy. The merits of whether it was the right thing to do or not, obviously, is a debate for another day. But I think it must be also made known that government actually broke policy, their own foreign policy in this particular case, and so it makes it very difficult for them now to be arbiters for there to be a non-biased in terms of the conflict that we currently see in Israel and Gaza.
I think when we have this conversation, it really is a multi-layered conversation and can really go quite far back.
Sure.
We could even involve the South African experience in the whole case here that we are discussing. But unfortunately, that's as much time as we've got for now. And I think it's interesting to actually have these conversations so we can understand where the other is actually coming from. And that's very important, especially in a democracy. But I think also just finally, then, just some food for thought is, was a one-state solution never thought of? In a scenario where Jews and Palestinians were able to coexist peacefully, live together in harmony, similar to what happened in South Africa in 1994, where the Bantustans were then done away with and everyone was integrated into one united South Africa.
Well, let me say that in terms of the ACDP policy, I won't be able to give a position because we haven't actually discussed a one-state solution.
I think it would be good to...
But it's certainly something that we as the ACDP will take away and ask for our policies coordinators to look into.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and
for
your insights on Salam Media.
Thank you.
That was Mr. Thring from the ACDP speaking to us about a variety of issues. In fact, this interview having extended quite a lot longer than expected, but absolutely a pleasure speaking to him this afternoon. Stay with us. We'll be bringing you the latest from the Results Operations Center as and when it happens. Stay tuned.